right, everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Yes, welcome back.
This time, we're going deep into the world of serial killers.
Oh, spooky.
Yeah, a little bit creepy, but super fascinating.
Definitely.
And to guide us, we've got some excerpts from, you guessed it,
Hit me.
the serial killer Wikipedia page.
Of course. The fountain of all knowledge.
Exactly.
What
So
else?
by the end of this deep dive, you'll understand what makes a serial killer tick, the different types, their motivations, all that good stuff.
The good stuff, well, maybe not good, but definitely interesting stuff.
Right, exactly. Definitely interesting, maybe not good.
Yeah.
So to kick things off, let's start with the basics.
Okay, back to square one.
How do we even define a serial killer? I mean, it's not just about the body count, is it?
You're right. It's a bit more nuanced than that.
Okay, so nuanced. Lay it on me.
Well, you see, it used to be that the FBI, they defined a serial killer as someone who committed at least 3 murders.
3, okay.
Yeah, 3 or more, with this thing called a cooling off period between each murder.
Cooling off? Like they just chill out for a bit.
Exactly, like a break, a pause before they strike again.
Wow, okay, so what changed?
Well, now they've actually lowered that threshold to 2 murders.
2. Wow, so less cooling off.
Well, it's not just about the number of murders anymore, you see.
Okay, so 2 is enough now.
Yeah, 2 is enough if there's like a pattern, something that connects the crimes, like a ritual or something really specific.
So it's more about the echoes between the crimes than a hard number.
Exactly. It's like those echoes, those chilling similarities that really define a serial killer.
It's like their signature, in a way.
Yeah, a dark and twisted signature for sure.
But this whole idea of a serial killer, this isn't exactly new, is it?
You're right. It's not new at all.
Like, haven't we always been fascinated by these figures?
Absolutely. I mean, think about all those ancient myths and legends.
Like, what kind of myths?
Well, like werewolves, vampires, all those creatures lurking in the shadows.
Oh, yeah, right. Those classic monsters.
Yeah, those stories, they tap into some primal fear, like a recognition that there's darkness even in the most civilized societies.
Totally. It's like we've always known that monsters can hide in plain sight.
Exactly. And sometimes those monsters, they're not just fictional, they're real.
That's a scary thought.
Yeah, it is.
The Wikipedia page actually mentions some chilling historical figures who might have been, well, let's just say they fit the bill.
Like who?
Well, there's this guy, Gilles de Rais.
Gilles de Rais, the name rings a bell.
He was a wealthy nobleman from Europe, and get this, he allegedly killed hundreds of children.
Hundreds? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's a really disturbing case, and what's even creepier is that he was a respected figure, like a war hero who fought alongside Joan of Arc.
Wow, so a real Jekyll and Hyde situation.
Exactly. It just goes to show you that evil can wear many masks, even the mask of respectability.
That's a chilling thought.
And then there's Elizabeth Bathory.
Oh yeah, the Blood Countess.
Exactly. She was a Hungarian countess accused of torturing and killing hundreds of young women.
It's like something straight out of a horror movie.
Right. And the stories about her bathing in their blood, I mean...
Yeah, pretty gruesome stuff.
It's tough to separate fact from fiction with her, but her case just adds to that whole idea that humans are capable of incredible cruelty.
Yeah, it's a dark side of human nature that's hard to comprehend.
And then hold on to your hats, we've got Thug Baram.
Thug Baram. Who's that?
This guy was a member of the Thuggee cult in India.
A cult. That adds another layer of creepy.
For sure. And get this, he allegedly confessed to killing over 900 people.
900? That's insane. Like, how is that even possible?
I know, right? It's mind-boggling, and it makes you wonder about the role of cults and group dynamics in these kinds of things.
Like, how does a group like that indoctrinate people to such an extent that they lose all sense of morality?
It's like they create their own twisted reality where murder becomes normal, or even, dare I say, celebrated.
Yeah, it's a dark and twisted path, for sure.
Speaking of figures who've captured the public imagination, we can't forget Jack the Ripper.
Oh yeah, Jack the Ripper, the OG serial killer.
Exactly. His case back in 1888's London, it really set the stage for our modern fascination with these figures.
It's like he was the blueprint, the one who really kicked off the whole serial killer phenomenon.
Right, the gruesome murders, the mystery, the fact that he was never caught.
It's like a real-life horror story, and it's still captivating people today.
His case was a media sensation, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It was all over the newspapers. People were terrified and fascinated at the same time.
And he was taunting the police with those letters.
Yeah, those cryptic letters, they just added to the mystery and the fear.
It's like he was playing a game with the whole city.
And winning, unfortunately.
Jack the Ripper's case also really pushed forward criminal investigation Deeks, right?
Oh, absolutely. It was a turning point.
Like they had to develop new methods to try to catch him.
Right. Things like profiling, crime scene analysis, it all stems from those early investigations.
It's like he inadvertently helped to create the tools that would eventually be used to catch other serial killers.
In a way, yeah, it's a strange legacy.
Okay, so we've talked about the definition, the historical context, but now let's get into the nitty-gritty.
The psychology, the why.
Exactly. What drives these individuals to commit such horrific acts?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
The Wikipedia page mentions some common characteristics, but it's complex, to say the least.
Oh, yeah, super complex. There's no one-size-fits-all answer.
Like, is it all about mental illness? Or is there something else at play?
Well, mental illness is definitely a factor in some cases, but it's not the whole story.
Okay, so it's more nuanced than that.
Much more. It's often a combination of factors.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, you've got things like childhood trauma, social isolation, maybe even some genetic predispositions.
So it's like a perfect storm of different factors converging.
Exactly. And for some people, that storm leads them down a very dark path.
There's this thing called the McDonald Triad that I found really interesting.
Oh, yeah, the triad. Tell me about it.
It's this set of 3 behaviors that have been linked to violent tendencies later in life.
Okay, what are the behaviors?
Bedwetting, fire setting, and cruelty to animals.
Yikes. Those are some red flags.
Yeah, and when they appear together, it can be a sign of trouble.
But it's not a guarantee, right?
No, not at all. It's just one piece of the puzzle.
It's like a warning sign, but not a prediction.
Exactly. And it highlights how important it is to understand the whole picture.
The whole context, yeah.
Speaking of childhood experiences, the Wikipedia page talks about how early trauma can play a huge role in shaping a serial killer's psyche.
Oh, yeah. Trauma, especially in childhood, can have devastating effects.
Like how so?
Well, imagine experiencing abuse, neglect, or witnessing violence at a young age.
That's got to be incredibly damaging.
It is. It can create these deep-seated feelings of powerlessness, rage, and a need for control.
And for some people, those feelings can manifest in really dark ways later in life.
Exactly. It's like that trauma creates a wound that never heals.
And sometimes those wounds, they fester and turn into something monstrous.
That's a tragic cycle.
And then there's this whole thing about fantasy.
Oh, yeah. Fantasy plays a big role.
Like how so?
Well, for some individuals, coping with that early trauma, it involves creating a fantasy world.
A fantasy world. Okay, I'm listening.
In this world, they're in control. They can inflict pain. They can escape the powerlessness they felt as children.
It's like a way to regain a sense of agency.
Exactly. But the problem is, those fantasies, they can become more and more violent.
And eventually, the line between fantasy and reality blurs.
Yeah, and that's when things get really dangerous.
So we've got this complex mix of factors, mental illness, trauma, fantasy, but there are also different types of serial killers, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They're not all the same.
Like, what are the main categories?
Well, one key distinction is between organized and disorganized killers.
Organized versus disorganized. Okay, I'm intrigued.
So organized killers, they're like meticulous planners. They choose their victims carefully.
It's like they're following a script.
Yeah, exactly. They want to control every aspect of the crime.
And what about disorganized killers?
Well, they're more impulsive, chaotic. Their crimes are often driven by sudden urges.
So it's like a spectrum with control freaks on one end and impulsive actors on the other.
You got it. And of course, there are variations within those categories.
Speaking of variations, what about those chilling stories about angels of death?
Oh, yeah, the medical professionals who prey on their patients.
It's like a betrayal of trust on the most fundamental level.
Absolutely. And it's a particularly disturbing type of serial killer.
Because they're operating within a system that's supposed to be about healing and care.
Right. It's a total inversion of that.
So what drives these individuals?
Well, it's likely a mix of things.
Like what?
Some might have a God complex, a desire to control life and death.
It's like they're playing God.
Exactly. While others might be motivated by a warped sense of mercy.
Warped mercy. What do you mean by that?
Like they believe they're ending suffering, even though their methods are completely twisted.
Wow, that's a messed up way of thinking.
Definitely. And because these killers operate within a system of trust, they can often go undetected for a long time.
It's a scary thought that someone you trust could be capable of such horrific acts.
Yeah, it's a reminder that evil can hide in the most unexpected places.
And one more thing that surprised me. Female serial killers are more common than I initially thought.
Oh, yeah, that's a common misconception.
Like, what's the actual percentage?
Estimates suggest they commit around 15% of all serial murders.
15%, that's significant.
It is, and it challenges the stereotype that serial killers are mostly men.
So do female serial killers operate differently from their male counterparts?
There are some interesting differences.
Like what?
Well, while male serial killers often target strangers, female serial killers tend to target people they know.
People they know. Wow, that's even more disturbing.
Yeah, it's like a betrayal of intimacy.
And their motives, are they different too?
They can be. While some female serial killers are driven by power or revenge, many are motivated by more practical things,
Practical things. Like what?
like financial gain, for example.
So it's more about cold, hard cash than bloodlust.
In some cases, yes. But again, it's important to remember that there's no single profile that fits all female serial killers.
They're a diverse group, just like their male counterparts.
Exactly. And their motives can be just as complex and varied.
This is already so insightful, and I feel like we're just scratching the surface.
Oh yeah, we've got a lot more ground to cover.
We've talked about definitions, history, psychology, but we haven't even touched on the investigations, the methods used to catch these guys.
That's coming up next, so stay tuned. It's going to get even more interesting.
I can't wait. This deep dive is shaping up to be a real thriller.
Buckle up. It's going to be a wild ride.
We're back and ready to go even deeper into the world of serial killers.
Deeper, all right.
So we've talked about, how we define them, their backgrounds, all that.
Right, the foundation.
But what about the big why?
The why, the motive.
Exactly what makes them do it? What drives them to kill?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
That's like trying to look into the abyss,
Blinks into darkness.
For sure. And the Wikipedia page, it actually outlines 4 main categories of motives for serial killers.
4. Okay, I'm listening.
So first up, we have visionary killers.
Visionary.
They're the ones who are often driven by like hallucinations or delusions, right?
Yeah, that's right. They believe they're acting on instructions from some higher power.
A higher power, okay.
Yeah, it could be God, the devil, even aliens, whatever their messed up beliefs are.
So they're not necessarily planning these murders out. They're just responding to like a command.
Right. It's more impulsive, driven by their distorted reality.
It's like they're on a twisted mission from God or something.
In their minds, yeah.
The article mentions Herbert Mullen, who thought he had to kill people to prevent earthquakes.
Oh, yeah, Mullen, that's a classic example.
It's just so bizarre. Like, how do you even get to that point?
It's a tragic case of psychosis gone wrong.
Yeah, and it shows how mental illness can really play a role in these crimes.
For sure. But again, it's not always so straightforward.
Right. It's complex.
Whatever.
So, moving on, we have the mission-oriented killers.
Mission-oriented, okay.
These are the ones who feel like they've got to, rid the world of certain types of people.
Yeah, they appoint themselves judge, jury, and executioner.
It's like a warped sense of justice.
Totally warped, and they often target specific groups.
Groups that they see as immoral or undesirable, like prostitutes, drug addicts, certain minorities.
Yeah, it's all fueled by prejudice and hate.
Like Joseph Paul Franklin, who targeted Black people and Jewish people.
Oh yeah, Franklin, a classic example of a hate-driven killer.
His case is just a reminder that hate can be a powerful motivator for violence.
Absolutely, and it's something we see playing out in different ways throughout history, unfortunately.
Okay, so next up we have the hedonistic killers.
Hedonistic, the pleasure seekers.
Yeah, and this is where things get really disturbing for me.
I get it. It's a tough one to wrap your head around.
Because these are the killers who get pleasure from the act of killing itself, right?
That's right. The thrill, the power, even sexual gratification.
Like Jeffrey Dahmer.
Dahmer. Yeah. His case is a prime example of how dark and twisted the human mind can get.
His crimes were just so horrific. The torture, the cannibalism, it's almost beyond comprehension.
It really pushes the boundaries of what we consider human.
But hedonistic killers, they're not all driven by, overtly sexual desires, are they?
No, not always. Some are more about the thrill of the hunt.
The hunt, okay.
Yeah, the adrenaline rush of stalking and capturing their victims.
Like the Zodiac killer, right?
Yeah, the Zodiac, he seemed to revel in the terror he caused.
It's like the killing wasn't enough. He needed the attention, the fame.
Notoriety, yeah, that can be a powerful motivator for some.
It's like they want to be remembered, even if it's for something horrific.
Exactly. It's a twisted form of legacy.
But going back to hedonistic killers, there's this other subtype that I just can't get my head around, the comfort killers.
Comfort killers. Interesting.
Like, how can someone find comfort in taking a life?
Well, for them, it's not so much about the act itself, but the rewards that come with it.
Rewards, okay.
Yeah, things like money, power, control, they kill, to remove obstacles or to make their lives easier.
So it's more about practicality than anything else.
In a way, yes, it's cold and calculated.
Like Dorothea Puente, who poisoned her tenants to collect their Social Security checks.
Yeah, Puente, she's a classic example of a comfort killer.
But wait, how is that different from, like, a hitman?
Ah, good question. There's a fine line there.
Okay, because they're both killing for money, right?
Right, but the difference is in the motivation.
Okay, explain that to me.
So a hitman, they're usually hired by someone else. They have no personal investment in the victim.
It's just a job.
Exactly.
Yep.
But a serial killer, their motivation comes from within. It's driven by their own twisted desires.
So it's about fulfilling their own needs, not someone else's.
Exactly. That's what